you put this back?
So our last part of this unit is what we call cell processes, which means different things that happen within cells. And there's 4 things mainly that we're going to be talking about. Diffusion, osmosis, and then photosynthesis and respiration. So over today, tomorrow, and the beginning of next week, we'll talk about diffusion osmosis. Then we'll be moving into respiration and photosynthesis after that. So we're just going to, yeah, David? Yeah, so we'll quiz on all of these together. All right, so when we start talking now about osmosis and diffusion, we have to start with just some basics of physical science. Concentration. Okay? So I know you guys studied mixtures and solutions in elementary school at some point, right? Okay. All right, so if we make a Kool-Aid solution, I have 2 glasses of Kool-Aid, A and B. Which has a higher concentration of Kool-Aid? Phil? A would? Henry?
B.
Okay, which now, who thinks they're confident in their answer? A higher concentration of Kool-Aid. Dan?
B.
Why B?
Because it's redder.
Okay, so what does it mean to have a higher concentration? They're the same amounts of Kool-Aid. Emily?
Have a stronger taste.
It's a stronger taste. And how do you make it have a stronger taste? David?
By putting less water?
Well, I have the same amount of water.
Oh, by putting more powder.
Yeah, so if I have more of the powder with the same amount of water, I end up with a stronger taste, a higher concentration. If I were to draw the atoms of Kool-Aid powder in the samples, sample A would have less in the same amount of water, sample B would have more. So we say we have a higher concentration of Kool-Aid in sample B, which has a higher concentration of water.
Sample
Sample A. Okay, if we have more of the Kool-Aid powder, we have less of a concentration of water. So, some terms that we use. If you want to make this Kool-Aid taste like this Kool-Aid, could you do so? By doing what? David?
By putting more powder.
But you could put more powder into this?
Oh, I
It'll
thought you were putting
No.
by putting less powder.
I can't, I have only this cup of Kool-Aid.
Putting more water in?
Yes, you could add more water and you could dilute it, giving a lower concentration of Kool-Aid, a higher concentration of water. So we call these solutions. Okay? A solution is a mixture of 2 things. The solute, which is the substance that seems to disappear, and the solvent, which is what holds the solid. So if you make a glass of Kool-Aid, what's the solute? Talia?
The Kool-Aid mixture.
The Kool-Aid powder. And the solvent is water. For our cases, water is almost always going to be the solvent. There can be other solvents, but we usually are going to talk about water as a solvent. So if I look at examples such as sugar water, if you take a tablespoon of sugar, mix it around in a glass of water, the sugar will seem to disappear. Is it gone though?
No.
No, even though you can't see it, how do you know it's there?
You can taste it.
You could taste it. Even though it seems to have disappeared, it's still there. It is what we call dissolved. So if I make some sugar water, what's the solute?
The sugar.
The sugar. And the solvent?
The water.
The water. In my samples, which is a higher concentration for sugar? Christopher? B does. And which has a higher concentration of water? A. Here I have some salt water. These are salt molecules. What's the solute if I make some salt water? Salt. And the solvent? Water. And A obviously is a higher concentration of salt. B is a higher concentration of water. Slightly different example, some sugar water, glucose and water. What's the solute if I make a glucose solution?
Glucose,
Glucose, the solvent,
the water,
which has a higher concentration of glucose.
sample B.
But they both have 6 molecules in them.
But the water
There's less
size is
water.
different.
Right. But because I have less water, B has a higher concentration. Imagine if I took a tablespoon of salt and put it in a cup of water like this versus an equal amount of salt in a big cup of water, which is going to taste stronger?
That.
The smaller amount of water because there's a much higher concentration, even though it's the same amount of salt. By dissolving in less of the solvent, it forms a solution that has a higher concentration of salt. Okay, so this brings us to the concepts of osmosis and diffusion. So we know the cell membrane. You just had a quiz on cell organelles. What is the cell membrane's function? Drew?
To allow things to open up.
Yeah, to regulate the movement of molecules in and out of the cell. It's a really thin layer. It's called a phospholipid bilayer. But it's this really thin layer that is what we call semi-permeable. You know what semi-permeable would mean? You know what permeable might mean? No? Permeable means that a substance can freely pass through. Impermeable means what?
Substances can't.
Cannot pass through. So a cell membrane is something that we call semi-permeable. What do you think that means? It's semi-permeable. Matea?
Some things could pass and some.
Yeah, some materials can pass through the cell membrane, other things cannot. You want to take a guess, what kind of materials could pass through a cell membrane? Matea? Not usually.
Air,
Why?
because it carries nutrients.
David?
Maybe. No. Water.
Water can. Oxygen can. Carbon dioxide can. These are small molecules. So often small molecules can pass through the membrane. You don't have this slide. Larger molecules cannot. Okay? So just thinking back to our Kool-Aid example. Concentration. The strength of a solution. So if we look at this glass of Kool-Aid, describe it in terms of its concentrations. David?
It has more of a solid. What's it called? It has more of a solvent than a solute.
Yeah, so it has a high concentration of the solute, which is Kool-Aid. Low concentration of solute, Kool-Aid, and a high concentration of what? The water, which is the solvent. And at the opposite end, this glass of Kool-Aid, describe it. Richard?
It has a high concentration of Kool-Aid and a low concentration of water.
Right, it has the opposite. A high concentration of Kool-Aid, a lower concentration of water. So as we talk about diffusion, we talk about molecules moving from place to place. And molecules, when we talk about a molecule, we're talking about basically the building blocks of matter. All matter is made of small little pieces that we call molecules. A molecule is basically the smallest amount of water you can have is a single molecule of water. Okay, 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to 1 oxygen atom. That's a molecule of water. It's still water. It has all the properties of water, but it's basically the smallest amount of water you could possibly have. And so molecules move from place to place. And the concept that describes how that happens is diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Think about it this way. Molecules do not like to be crowded together. They will spread out to a less crowded area, if possible. For an example, over the weekend, Mr. Arcuri went to a chili festival.
Is this true?
So, when I walked into the classroom this morning, I walked in, unlocked the door, and I saw Mr. Arcuri was in that corner of the room. And he quickly went back into his room. I walked in here, and a minute or two later, there's a stench filling the room that I could smell all the way over here. The molecules that Mr. Arcuri had released in this corner of the room had diffused from an area of high concentration as he walked out of the room. There was a high concentration of these stench molecules in that corner of the room. But because they are crowded, stench molecules, like any molecules, will tend to spread out. And they spread out, bouncing around, bouncing off each other until I could smell them all the way in this corner of the room. I could say those molecules had diffused throughout the room. So smell diffusing through a room. A drop of dye placed in water. The dye molecules go from the little droplet when I put them in the room, in the water, and spread throughout the water because there's a lower concentration. That is what diffusion is. How was the chili festival? Good? Okay? All right. So, why do molecules do this? Well, because they are moving randomly. Molecules are constantly bouncing around, moving, and they tend to bump into each other, and that causes them to spread out. If you look at some molecules, when they're tightly clustered and they're moving around, they bounce, they move, and over time they will spread out. That is called diffusion. If I were to take every single 7th grader in our school, I could probably fit them into this room. It'd be super tight, obviously, and sweaty and smelly and hot. But I could probably force every 7th grader in this room. Would that be a high concentration of 7th graders?
Yes.
Yes. If I then, though, did that, and then I opened up the door to Miss Canelli's room next door, what would probably happen?
Everyone would go.
Everyone would go over there?
A lot of people.
Why'd you gotta say everyone? Why wouldn't everyone go over there?
Then it would be
It's
the
the
same.
same.
They'd be just as crowded. So how many people would go over there? About half. Okay. Then I open the door to Mr. Arcuri's room, although they might not want to. Okay. Probably another group of people would move over there until they have a little bit more space and so forth. That's like molecules. They tend to go from a crowded area to a less crowded area. They diffuse. A type of diffusion is called osmosis. So osmosis is the diffusion of water molecules. So just like any other molecules, whether it's perfume or dye or stench molecules, they tend to spread out. They want to go from a crowded area to a less crowded area. So osmosis is the diffusion of water across a membrane usually. And just like in diffusion, on osmosis, water will always go from a high to a low concentration. Now I have this this apparatus sits. Sometimes I set up, but often it leaks and it doesn't work very well. But if I have a U-shaped tube here, okay, and it comes in two parts, and in the middle, you can actually put a membrane, a little piece of plastic that's a semi-permeable membrane. Okay. And on one side, I put some sugar water. That's what the purple molecule circles represent, sugar molecule. On the other side, I put some stronger sugar solution with more sugar dissolved in it, hence more purple dots. Now, where is there a higher concentration of sugar molecules? Talia?
The one with more solute.
Yeah, on this side, right?
Side.
And there's a lower concentration of sugar molecules here. So what would the sugar molecules like to do?
Spread.
Yeah, go from which side to which side?
The right
The
to
right
left.
side.
And they'd like to go over here and equalize, because they're crowded over here. But what if this membrane blocks sugar molecules? Well, then they can't get over there. They're stuck. How about water? Where's there a higher concentration of water in this apparatus? Christopher?
The left side.
On the left. Okay, there's more of a concentration of water than here. Which way would the water like to go?
Right.
Left to right. If this membrane is permeable to water, what do you think this would look like?
That one starts.
Kind of sugar on it.
What?
The full tube on the right side and the left side will just kind of have little sugar molecules.
So all the water would go over there?
No.
Not all of it, some. And it actually does. What happens is the water level on this side rises up the tube. Because water molecules are going from left to right, high concentration to low concentration. If I take some cells, some blood cells, that's what these represent. Cells vary on the type of cell. Between 80 and maybe 90% of a cell is actually just water. If I take, let's say I have a cell that is 85% water, and I put it in a solution, a salt solution, which is also 85% water, what do you think will happen? Right?
The cell will absorb the water.
Well, what if they're equal concentration? David?
I think nothing will happen.
Yeah, and that's correct. If a cell is in an equal concentration of water, really nothing happens. Oops. But if instead I put one of those cells in a beaker of, let's say, very salty water, let's say it's 30% salt and 70% water, where is there a higher concentration of water? In the cell or in that liquid?
Cell.
In the cell. And so which way do molecules move in osmosis?
Out.
Not, don't tell me in, but they always move from
High to low.
high to low concentration. So in this situation, there was a higher concentration of water in the cells, a lower concentration in that liquid, and so water leaves the cells, causing them to sort of deflate and shrivel up. If I take some cells and I put them in pure water, 100% water, what happens in that situation? So if I have pure water, what percent water is that? 100%. If the cell is 85% water, what's going to happen, Drew?
It'll start to spread out.
The water is going to go from high to low concentration from the 100% water into the cell and cause it to swell up, maybe even burst.
Would it just like split blood everywhere? If it was a blood
Well,
cell?
it's a single blood cell, so the contents of the blood cell will leak out. Now, this is important in health. A couple examples. Does anyone wear contacts? No one here wears contacts? Does anyone have siblings or parents that wear contacts? Do they put them in a contact case with water from the sink?
No.
They don't. What do they have? Do you know what it's called? They put their contacts in?
Contact solution.
Yeah, there's another name for it. called saline solution. And there's a reason for that. Saline solution, now you guys know our context, but it's, if you ever got it in your mouth, it tastes slightly salty. So why is that? Think of a reason why. Yeah?
Because there's salt in it.
Why is there salt in it? What if it,
Oh, it's dilute the water.
not quite.
Because the content I was thinking, salt.
Yeah, because the contact lens is not 100% water. And so if you put contact lenses in just pure water, water goes into them and their shape changes. And then they don't fit properly. So the saline solution you buy at the store is balanced so that it has the proper level of salt and water so that it doesn't go into or remove water from your contacts. If a person is dehydrated, let's say, in the Boilermaker each year, see people on the side of the road passed out from dehydration. So they bring them to the medical tent. Now they're unconscious, they can't give them like a glass of water to drink. Do you know how they treat them? How do they help them overcome this dehydration? Tell you?
IV.
They give them IV fluids. A little plastic bag, they put a needle into one of their veins, and this bag goes into their bloodstream. Do they give them pure water?
No.
No. If they did, their blood cells would be in this situation. And they would expand, they could possibly burst. What do you think they give them? Ben?
Salt water.
Yeah, a balanced solution of salt or maybe sugar and water that's balanced so that it's more like this. So that they get water into their body, but it's not at a concentration which will cause their blood cells to shrink or to shrivel. Okay?
Pure water goes into the B sample,
Yep. No. Yes.
or would the water go down?
It would, if you could measure. It would be sort of, this is not obviously to scale because blood cells are much bigger, but yeah, it would. That water is going from that beaker into the solution. Okay, last couple things. So molecules move in constantly as we add heat to them. So the more you heat molecules, the faster they vibrate, and therefore, the faster diffusion takes place. Diffusion happens most quickly in a gas, because in gases, the molecules have great freedom of movement, they're moving fast, and so they bump into each other more frequently, causing the molecules to spread out. So we can increase the rate of diffusion by adding heat to a substance. There's also another factor that influences the rate of diffusion, how quickly molecules move, and that is the surface area that the molecules can pass through. The greater the surface area, the faster diffusion will take place. So I have up here 2 flasks of water, and I'm going to put a drop of food coloring in each of them. One of these is warmer water, one is cooler water. You should be able to tell after a minute or so.
One on the left's warm, one on the water. That's cool.
Yeah, top.
One on the left.
One on the left.
Is the one on the left the hot water? Is it? Split spray.
Look at, keep an eye on it.
What's the right? The right's steaming up. Yeah, the right is steaming.
Okay, so which is more evenly distributed at this point?
The left.
Yeah? That's pretty close. Yeah, there wasn't enough of a difference. This is actually the warmer one. This is the colder one. It's not that big of a difference, but it will diffuse faster through the warmer one. Surface area is also important. It's important in our body. Our small intestine, what's its function? Some of you are in health.
Digest.
No, not to digest food. That happens mostly in the stomach. Well, it does happen, I'm sorry, in the small intestine as well. But there's another important function. David?
Small intestine. What the hell? Digest?
It helps digest, but there's something even more important. Because digestion starts in the stomach, continues in the small intestine. Absorption of nutrients. And our small intestine, how long is it? Like 15 feet or so? Stretch my small intestine out probably to the windows. And the inside, it's not like a smooth tube inside. It's not like a hose. If it were, it would have a surface area of about like your desk. That would be the surface area where nutrients can diffuse into your blood. But it's not. It has all of these bumps and ridges inside of it, which give it a surface area that's actually about 2 basketball courts, is the surface area of our intestines. So that's a much greater area where we can absorb nutrients versus if our intestine were just a smooth tube. Same thing in our lungs. Our lungs are not just 2 like hollow balloons that inflate with air. They're made of these tiny little clusters of air sacs called alveoli. That gives them a very large surface area of about a basketball court where we can absorb, because diffusion is important in our lungs. We absorb oxygen in our lungs. Carbon dioxide from our body diffuses into the air we exhale. Last slide. So this concept of diffusion is a type of what we call passive transport. It does not require any energy. If I trapped all 7th graders in this room, would I have to force anybody to go into Miss Canale's room if I open the door?
No.
No, they would just go on their own and want to move from a high to a low concentration. So osmosis and diffusion are types of what we call passive transport. But there are ways of forcing molecules to move the opposite way, from a low concentration to a high concentration. But if I had all the 7th graders trapped in here, would any 9th graders willingly walk into this room?
No.
No. But I could grab a 9th grader, right? And I could force, so here there's a low concentration of students. I could grab a 9th grader and force them into this room. But it's going to take a little bit of energy from me to do so. They wouldn't do that on their own. That would be an example of active transport. Requires some energy. It can force molecules to go the opposite of the way they would want to go. And like imagine on your bike, you could go from high on the hill to low on the hill without expending any energy, right? Just go because of gravity. But to get up the hill from low to high, it would take you expending some energy. This happens using special proteins in the cell membrane and using energy. But molecules can be forced to move in the opposite direction. All right. So that's osmosis and diffusion. We have a few other demonstrations of it that we're going to do over the next couple days of class. Tomorrow we'll look at our gummy bears, see how they changed. Based on what we just talked about, you could probably predict what would happen. Not till after vacation. We'll have a quiz on osmosis, diffusion, photosynthesis, and respiration.